Here's a tip: push down all of your emotions. It's better to not feel any emotion than to feel any negative emotion. Just kidding. What's up, guys? It's Carney. Seriously, don't do what I just said. That's horrible advice. Fellas, how's it going? Ladies, what is going on? Okay, guys, here's the second episode of Here's a Tip. So today, we're gonna talk about samples, specifically making your own samples. So one time I was shadowing for a producer that I really respect, and he had already tracked this band, and then he was just bringing them into his own studio to kind of mess with them on his own and add effects and, etc. And he gave me some really good advice. He would print everything. What I mean by that is he wouldn't just be like, cool, I'm gonna put a bunch of plugins on it and then I'm just gonna leave it and hope that, I don't want to change it later. He looked at me and he was like, if you know something's good, if you think that what you have done, whether you reamped something and threw it through pedals, or whether you just, use plugins in your DAW, if you know it's cool, print it. You still have the stems and stuff, you can always go back and change it, but you should be confident about the moves that you're making. And for me personally, I love samples. I've always loved sampling things ever since I got into music production. So I kind of wanted to apply this to when I would try to make my own samples, and there's a way I found that I think is super, super cool. Two quick disclaimers. Number one, when I'm talking about samples here, I'm not talking about drum samples. I'm not talking about just kicks and snares and stuff like that. You could use this technique for those, but for today, I'm talking specifically kind of more about melodic stuff, more like what I refer to as the main sample. Like when you're listening to a song, there's all the percussion and maybe the 808 and stuff like that, but there's always that one melodic thing, or maybe it's not even melodic, but just that one kind of tonal thing that is what makes the song the song. I'm trying to think of some examples, like in Formation by Beyonce, it's the... In Ricky by Denzel Curry, it's the... My daddy said trust no man but your brothers and never leave your day ones in the gutter. So yeah, that's number one. I'm talking about stuff like that specifically. Number two, what I am about to show you is Ableton specific. I am sure there is some way to do this in other DAWs, but I don't know what that way is. So this is gonna be kind of an exclusive Ableton tutorial, but the principles behind it are universal. So stick around if you use Logic or FL or whatever. Just know that the exact methodology, you can't just plug and play this anywhere else. So let's just jump right into it. I found just this stock Ableton instrument called Nylon Mute Guitar, and I made this little melody with it. So yeah, nothing too crazy, just a little, it's just a little melody. So normally when I would look at something like this before, I would think, all right, well, how can I turn this into a cool sample? And I would put as many plugins on it as I possibly could until it sounded cool. And I still do that sometimes. There's nothing wrong with just really, really messing up some audio to get it to sound cool. That's totally a cool thing to do. But then I found this method, and I would say I probably use this more, and you might want to use it too. I started using audio effect racks for two primary reasons. Number one is you can affect the stereo spread of the sample itself in a much easier way, because in an Ableton audio effect rack, each chain that you have gets its own panning. So if I have a delay, like on this, for example, I have a delay and I have that a little bit to the right. And also the other plus of this is because it's an audio effect rack, it's almost like sends and returns, where I can have the dry signal be at unity. Oh my god. The dry signal is at unity gain, and the other ones are just blended in behind it. Now you may be thinking, but Carney, a lot of plugins have a dry wet knob. You don't need to use an audio effect rack for that. And you're right. But if you just put all of them in series just on the track without using the audio effect rack, they're going to affect each other. So if I have a reverb or a delay, I am either sending a reverb into the delay or I'm sending a delay into the reverb. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I don't want to only be able to do that. So those are the two biggest advantages of starting with the audio effect rack, is that you get to pan things independently and you also get to mix them in without worrying about any of the effects affecting each other. They're only affecting the original sample as you want to. So for this sample, I have a delay, which is just a pretty simple, it's like a triplet delay. I pan that a little bit to the right. I just use the Ableton stock delay on this one. Then I have the reverb. I used a chamber reverb from Valhalla. I wanted to use all stock plugins for this, but I hate the Ableton stock reverb with a passionate passion. So I'm sticking with Valhalla on this one. And then I did some distortion. I kept that in the center, but I also used the Ozone Imager on that to sort of give it some stereo spread. And for the distortion itself, I just used Pedal, the Ableton, that's also an Ableton stock instrument. Ableton stock plugin. We're gonna get this right, guys. I've said this in a previous video, but start using Pedal. I really like how it sounds. I think you can get some really interesting sounds out of really messing with the EQ on it and etc. So anyway, use Pedal. So that's what I have in the audio effect rack. We have the dry signal, we have a delayed signal that's a little bit panned, we have a reverb signal that's a little bit panned, and then we have a distortion that's in the center but stereo spread out a little bit. And then after this, I just did some pretty normal processing. I EQ'd out the lows and a little bit of the highs, and I put soothe on it to get rid of some of those bad frequencies that are kind of, grating at your ears. And then I used Blend EQ. It's an analog obsession plugin. I've talked about them in a bunch of videos. They're awesome, and it's free, but you should subscribe to the guy's Patreon because he makes a lot of great plugins for free for people, but he deserves some money because they're significantly better than a lot of other real plugin company plugins. So there we go. That's the initial sample. Could we stop there? Sure, we could stop there if we want. But personally, I really like messing with audio waveforms on, like, just as audio as well as the effects on them. So I chose to resample this, pitch it down, and change the timing of it. So this is where we get into more of the cool, like, sequencing stuff that actually can make a beat come alive. It's not just a loop playing over and over again. Now we can chop it up and, like, reverse one part, and we can have some parts kind of, like, repeat themselves. Can you do some of this stuff with MIDI clips? Yes, you can, but it's just way easier to do it with audio. And it also takes up way less CPU to use audio than it does to use MIDI. So this is what the sample sounds like, slowed down, pitched down, and sort of, chopped up a little bit. So there we go. Is this the greatest sample in the world? No, I did it in like 15 minutes. But is it way better than just a random loop that I could find? Or is it better than, does it give me more options to work with to make interesting sounds than if I had just used the MIDI clip and kind of stopped there? Yeah, I have a lot more creative freedom with this. I have a lot more stuff that I can do now that I have done it with this method. It's cleaner, it gives you a lot of flexibility, and it just, I don't know, it just opens a lot of doors in your brain and in the DAW. I will rate this tip a good and potentially fantastic. I think using the audio effect rack thing is a really, really, really good way to just get weirder with it, Just so much more flexibility when you don't have to worry about everything going into the next plugin and into the next plugin. And then after that, like I said, one, just for, the artistic confidence of being like, no, I'm gonna print this, I'm gonna resample this, record it into a new track, and start again from there. It's also just having audio to be able to chop up and stuff like that. And you still have the old MIDI. You can always go back to that. And, if you don't like what you did, then try something different. So I love this. I think everybody should do this. Hopefully this was helpful for you. I hope you guys are doing okay. I've been a little anxious lately. I'm not gonna lie. I'm out here making decisions about my future. I may maybe having a little crush on some people. Maybe you are too. Maybe you're, you feel, naked in a cold world, in a cold swamp. Maybe that's how you feel. It's how I feel sometimes, but I think I'm gonna be okay, and I think you're gonna be okay too. Go forth and be vulnerable and try things. And I believe in you. I really do. It's okay to not feel confident sometimes. I don't feel confident all the time, and I'm so hot and so objectively good at music. It just happens to the best. You got this. It's still early January. This is going to be a great year for you. I know it. All right, guys. Well, that's my time. I'm Carney. It was good hanging out with you today. Make sure to, share, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more me being an idiot and giving hopefully helpful information about music production. Have a great rest of your day, fellas. See you in the next one. And say something nice to the ladies on the way out.